Hello, and today I want to talk about why modern men are becoming weaker. So, 50% of men between the ages of 18 and 30 have not approached a woman in the last year. Another interesting stat, actually, is that it is predicted that 45% of women will be single and childless by the year 2030. But I want to focus on the men a little bit here. Why is it that men are not approaching women? If you've seen the titles of any of my videos on my channel, you will see that I talk about a lot about social media and the effects of social media and technology on society and the developing mind. So a big reason why it seems that a lot of this is happening is because when you have kids and they're growing up on social media, they're growing up interacting with their friends a lot of the time through text, Facebook Messenger, or through video games or what have you. They're not learning the skills to socialize. They're not learning the skills to socialize in person, to make new friends. And in the same way that they are losing a lot of these social skills and interactions, they are also not learning how to approach women. So before a lot of this technology, you would have men or like boys, teenagers, that would start to approach girls in high school, and then they would get rejected, and they would just learn through the process of approaching women and rejection, and then eventually they would gain confidence, and then at a certain point they would not be faced by rejection. And the thing is that the reality is that a lot of the time when you approach, it's not going to lead to a date, and there's nothing wrong with that. But because a lot of young men are not learning to do that, and on top of the fact that you have dating apps, so depending on the dating app, the average man actually doesn't get a lot of matches. There's a few reasons for this. I'm not going to get into all the different reasons and hypergamy and all of those stats. But a big reason as well is you do have dating apps where over 60% of men make up most of the user base of apps. Sometimes even up to 70%. Even if every single woman went out on a date and found a boyfriend through the dating apps, there's still going to be a lot left over just because a lot more men are on apps compared to women. And because the average man doesn't get a lot of matches, and the average man, a lot of conversations don't lead to a date or to a coffee date or anything, then a lot of these young men are feeling rejected already on social media. So they're feeling rejected on social media because they're not getting matches, and a lot of these matches, or the matches that they do get, usually don't lead to dates for the average man. So they already feel rejected. And then the one time that maybe they do happen to approach a woman in person, he gets rejected. And because his self-esteem is already down because he's not getting matches and he's not able to get dates through dating apps, his self-esteem and his self-worth is already lowered. I'm not saying that it's objectively lower, I'm just saying from his point of view. And then when he does approach a woman that leads to rejection, then men could take it really, really hard. So you could say, in a sense, yes, men are becoming weaker. But also I would say that men are, in a way, a victim to technology and social media, because they didn't learn these social skills. Again, in the same way that Gen Z is one of the loneliest generations, or is the loneliest generation, because they are so connected yet so far apart. Young people feel so lonely. It is the loneliness epidemic. And that not only affects friendships and other connections, but it's also affecting the way that people court and people date. So they're not learning these social skills in the same way that young people are not learning how to socialize and make friends in person. A lot of young men are not learning to approach women in person. So really, in part, they are a victim of technology. And women are also affected by technology in a lot of different ways. Like, we all know body image issues that are caused through social media, Instagram, all the influencers. But I think from the woman's side of view, also the dating apps also give an illusion of choice. And that's what it is. It's just an illusion of choice. But on the positive side of that, but then the stats, out of the 50% of men that did approach women, so out of that 50%, 70% were able to get a number or a follow-up date. A smaller percentage would lead to sex. And then in the long-term relationship, it was roughly like 20%. Right? Mind you, this is out of the 50% of men that do approach women. If the other 50% were to suddenly do it, it might not work in the same way, just because they're probably not going to be approaching them with confidence, right? And if you don't approach with confidence, then women aren't necessarily going to be attracted to somebody who doesn't have confidence. But again, that confidence is built, which again is not something that a lot of young men are learning. in part because of this, right? It's kind of interesting as well for the women that approach men. Rejection, they do take it especially hard because they feel like they are breaking a social norm to approach first, and then they still get rejected. So they feel like it's a double layer, which is why they can take it really hard. My experience is a little bit different with all of this because I am demisexual. I did make a video about that, so I don't experience primary attraction. I never have in my life. So I've been on many first dates where I was never attracted to the woman that I was speaking to because my attraction just develops over time. I've always been that way. I can't help it. So I have rejected a number of women, and I know they take it very hard because almost every single one of them basically disappeared and I never saw them again, and some of them were even visibly angry because it was probably the first time that they ever actually got rejected by a man. So my experience with all of this is a little bit different. But for other men out there, and for the average person that does experience a lot of primary attraction, approaching people is just something that you have to learn to do. And technology is something that has taken away that skill from young men. And yes, many would blame men and say, oh, they're just becoming weaker. But then, at the same time, can you really blame a high school kid that is growing up in a society where it's all technology? Everything is social media, everything is dating apps. Can you really blame him for being in that environment? And then, can you blame women for not being attracted to weak men or men who are not confident? Like, a lot of these things are evolutionary. So of course women are attracted to men who have confidence. And I would say it's not the direct fault of anybody. Is the result of a overall societal problem, which is all of this overuse of technology and not learning to talk to people in person. So I think these conversations are worth having, and it's worth talking about this so we can do something about it. But in other videos I have talked about how it's good for parents to get their kids to dial back on social media. Not only because of the societal thing of like learning to talk to people and make friends in person, but also just because social media use is correlated with more depression, anxiety, feelings of hopelessness, lack of purpose. There's also all of that subconscious comparison that is happening when you see all of these influencers for both men and women. You have all these perfect female influencers with a perfect body, and you have these perfect men with the six-pack abs. So it's affecting everybody. But then if you dial back, you're not only help with the issue of body image issues, low self-esteem, but also encouraging young people to socialize in person, make friends in person, go to group events, go to dance events, go to sporting events, go to an art club, just doing these things in person and socializing and making connections that way. And by doing all of that, it's going to help improve a lot of these societal problems, in my opinion. Not only the depression and all of this comparison that we do by comparing our lives to everybody else's highlight reels, but also from a socializing perspective. Anyways, a lot of these topics are important to me because the future of society is important to me. It should be important to you. It should be important to everybody. And if anybody comes across this video and you like what I have to say, I would appreciate you sharing the video. I'll be posting some more things like this often. Yeah, but the most important thing is to start the conversation. Start the conversation, and then that way we can all dial back on social media use to some extent. It's going to fix a lot of things, including this issue. So getting the conversation started is the most important.